I first became aware of NFTs, way back in December, when I noticed as part of the stuff I was covering for the Fin newsletter that people were using blockchain to sell what were being labeled works of art, but were really just tweets. For example, they would take an Elon Musk tweet about cryptocurrency and buy it, register it on the blockchain, and then turn around and sell it. And it really struck me as kind of cute at the time because the prices were really modest. They would be like, I got $300, and people would get very excited about that. And I wrote something about it, which I failed to use the term NFT, which now I'm really regretting that I didn't use that term. But it shows you just how fast these things develop, because obviously now we've seen in recent weeks works of NFT selling for tens of millions of dollars and really rivaling some of the foremost artists of our day, which is a tremendous development and lightning fast. And I think the thing that fascinates me the most is that this is really the first mass application of blockchain technology outside of the world of cryptocurrency, or you could argue that it's still sort of enveloped within the world of cryptocurrency, and we can talk about that. But what excites me about that is that the blockchain conversation to date has been largely technical and largely dominated by people within cryptocurrency. And now you're exposing this technology to a whole new group of people who are by definition creators and creative. And where they take this technology, I think, is going to be one of the most fascinating developments of this decade. So I'm really pumped for this conversation, and let's hear from Max.
Before Max starts, hold on. I want to just elaborate one thing Jim said. NFTs really are not about art per se. An NFT just means a record that's kept on a blockchain that is unique, in effect. And many of the claims we've heard for a long time about blockchain's impact on society and the likelihood that it would be a transformative organizational methodology for societal functioning depends on NFTs. If we ever were to buy and sell houses, or even keep a record of the flow of water in a dam or something like that, NFTs will be necessary, because NFTs are a non-fungible, meaning unique, record that is kept on a blockchain of something. It just happens that lately they've been in the news because the something has been art, which went for as much as $69 million when Beeple's sale happened recently at Max's competitor auction house. So Max, why are you here? What are you doing with NFTs? Who is PAC? And thank you for being here to explain it all.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. And Mark, it's a pleasure to meet you as well. Yeah, it's a low question. We're starting at a high level, but at first, I just want to introduce myself and my background a little bit. My name is Max Moore. I'm the co-head of the Contemporary Art Day Sale in New York. I've been running the sale for about 3 years now. It's about a $100 million sale that happens each May and November. And it's really at the kind of cutting edge moment of the market where a new artist is kind of introduced in an occasion, or mid-career artists establish their marketplaces. So you can really see the intersection in a sale that I run between, I would say, like artistic quality and what value is ascribed to it. And so my focus again is in emerging art and emerging markets. And I was interested, well, mind you, I didn't know what blockchain was, I would say 6 months ago. Which I think is quite fascinating. I've developed and learned enough of an understanding to really make myself equipped for these conversations, but I'm not any sort of technology guru expert in this, and I understand my limitations when explaining some of these concepts. But for the most part, I have a general basic understanding of how the blockchain technology works, and how artists and creators in today's age can utilize the blockchain technology to promote and essentially commercialize their digital creations. So about 3 months ago, I've been following the market for about 6 months, but about 3 months ago, I was put in touch with an artist by the name of Pac. It's a kind of a pseudo-anonymous artist, very minimal, very conceptually driven approach to the space. And I was immediately intrigued. I now have basically a daily call with the artist and have a running text message with them. I've learned a lot of my complete understanding from this artist, which is a very interesting and unique opportunity for me that I've taken and relished every moment of. But it's opened my eyes to how creators can use this technology, you know, and create something quite beautiful in a way, and an artwork in and of itself.
What exactly is happening and how soon? You've got a fairly significant upcoming
Yes.
development.
So we had an announcement about 2 weeks ago that we were partnering with Pac in our first endeavor into this digital marketplace. Yesterday, we released another teaser kind of addressing who is Pac, kind of a compilation or a summation of all of Pac's previous works, and a very, you know, visually and acoustically beautiful teaser. The sale dates were released yesterday, April 12th to the 14th. And, you know, it's something that we've come a long way from Sotheby's in a very short amount of time to address and enter this marketplace in a meaningful way. And I think we're taking this approach very thoughtfully and addressing a lot of the concerns that, you know, have come forward in it throughout the concepts of this sale. So I think it's going to be a very interesting one to really showcase, you know, to the world, given the kind of global marketplace that we can offer and lend to legitimizing this movement.
But given that Beeple's work sold for 69 million not too long ago, and that Pac's own work has sold for upwards close to 1 million in the past, you're expecting the sale of it's multiple works by Pac, correct? Yeah,
that's correct.
Have you announced how many exactly?
No, not yet, but I can announce that there is an open edition component, which a lot of the kind of savvy collectors or people that understand and have been collecting in the space will understand the concept of open edition. It'll be very new and quite revolutionary and have its own critique and criticism from a traditional art world collector. That will all be addressed as the sale unfolds. But yeah, you did mention the $69 million result from Beeple. For me, the success of this sale will not be, you know, achieving that price. It'll more be, in effect, an understanding of how many participants are actually, you know, purchasing something from this sale, and that's what the open edition kind of speaks to, and the commoditization of art at a more, you know, democratized level speaks to. And I think that's the real element that we're bringing to this sale that is quite different and unique and interesting, and really provides a snapshot of kind of what we're dealing with right now, and both, you know, from the crypto native community, but also, you know, from the traditional art community.
Okay, well, a lot more details about what you're doing, I think we may want to drill down into. And before we go to Mark, I should have announced at the outset, I was so pleased that we were able to play the SNL video, I forgot to do it, that Techonomy, thanks to Jim's entrepreneurial work, has, as of yesterday, put up as an NFT our most famous video artifact, which is the quote of Mark Zuckerberg on our stage 2 days after the election of Donald Trump, in which he said, "It's a crazy idea that fake news on Facebook affected the election in any way." So that is now available for sale as an NFT, and we've already got it's already bid up to $200 in Ethereum, which is how it's done, and it's on the OpenSea platform. Is that right, Jim? That they should go to for that?
Yeah, I'll put the link in the chat.
Okay, and we have an article that Jim wrote yesterday that's published on Techonomy, but we figured it was partly a way of experimenting with this idea. But the point is, anything could be sold as an NFT, because an NFT is basically a reference to something which may or may not be virtual. Mark, what's your reaction to anything here? And why did you feel compelled to write a fairly funny, as I said, but acerbic column about NFTs.
Well, acerbic is the only way I know how to write, so that's my excuse. First, I just want to say thanks, David, for inviting me to participate. And Jim and Max, nice meeting both of you, and everybody in the audience. Thanks for showing up. As you said, David, a few weeks ago, I wrote a column. All my columns are at creativegood.com. I write a weekly column there. And I wrote a column that got some attention called Pumping Up the Worthless with NFTs. And I should say at the outset, I'm not a blockchain expert, certainly not an art market expert. So I'll defer to the other panelists on some of those deep dives. But for me, I'm sort of a generalist. I look at how technology is affecting us generally. And what was interesting to me in seeing the Beeple sale and some of the other initial high-profile NFT sales is it wasn't how they were being sold and how they were using cryptocurrency or the blockchain, but to me, what was more interesting is what was being sold. And Beeple, this artwork that sold for $69 million, it was basically a compilation of digital artworks that he had posted to Instagram over many years. No doubt, took him many, many hours over many years, and he's a talented artist, but it's not worth $69 million. The more interesting...
It was to somebody.
It was, yes, but we're going to get to that, the value. What's even more interesting to me is that a few days before the Beeple sale, the Nyan Cat animation sold. And this is a looping GIF. If you've been online long enough, you've seen it. There's YouTube videos featuring the Nyan Cat. It's just this iconic animated GIF meme that's been around for a long time. And by the way, as you know, if you've seen it on your computer, then you have it. I mean, you have that GIF animation on your computer. And so the Nyan Cat animation was attached to an NFT and sold at auction, and it went for, I think, $500,000. And I thought, that's really interesting. I'm not an expert in blockchain, not an expert in some of these other areas, but I do know what a GIF animation is. It's a series of frames, GIF frames that are looped together. And this is also a particular animation that everybody has. In other words, this thing's worthless. It's not unique. You can get it for free anywhere and anytime. And in fact, in my Pumping Up the Worthless column, I linked to it. I gave the readers the Nyan Cat animation for free. So if they can have it for free, why did somebody pay $500,000 for it? And I thought about it, and I realized that there is something new going on with NFTs that we haven't seen before. That's often my filter question. What is actually new here that we haven't seen before? Now, we've had a market where assets have been bought and sold for a long time, and we've had various ways of valuing assets. And for a long time, assets, let's say on the stock market, would be valued by what's called intrinsic value, which Jim knows more about than I do, just to state. But the idea of intrinsic value is that there is some inherent value to a slice of a company that the market may over or underprice, but it's fair to pay that amount because someone else eventually will value it the same or hopefully more. This idea of intrinsic value was written about in a 1949 book called The Intelligent Investor by a Columbia Business School professor named Benjamin Graham, who was the mentor to Warren Buffett, which is an investing name that people have heard of today. And that idea of intrinsic value, let's say one share of Apple, is backed by an actual company. So it makes sense. You could read all about how you calculate and everything, but there is some intrinsic value. What if we use that frame that has guided stock market investment for however many decades and apply that to the Nyan Cat animation? You see, there's something new here. There is no intrinsic value to a GIF animation, and yet someone assigned $500,000 to it. And I think that, to me, anyway, personally, is the more interesting point, not so much how blockchain is being used, but why people are valuing worthless GIF animations or compilations of Instagram posts that are not worth $69 million, valuing them at such high prices.
Okay, I want to go to Max because I think we have to give him a chance to respond to that, because the same holds true in effect for PAC's work, that technically speaking, the digital related image or images that they are making available as an NFT are available to anyone. But still, you have people who are interested in bidding for that. You've been out talking to some of them. What would you say, Max, is the motivation of people, and what would you find wrong in what Mark just said?
So listen, I think what Mark's skepticism is valid to any degree when viewing the Neon Cat purely from the intrinsic value point and comparing it to how one would associate value to a stock market. But when you start comparing it to the art market, for example, where there is no real, what we would define as like an intrinsic value that can be kind of quantifiable with data points and cold hard evidence, so to speak, and it's really the value starts to more so apply to whoever's willing to appreciate it financially and is the highest bidder. Now you start to come into a realm where the impossible that the skepticism that you're addressing begins to get managed a little bit better. So I completely understand, like, when you break down the components of a painting, like let's say the price of a painting is based on the canvas and the paintbrush and the paint, that's the economic value that the creator imbues into it. And you're not buying, that's not a one-to-one transaction. You're buying the concept behind it. You're buying the thought behind it. You're buying the skill set that this creator has embedded. Now, the Neon Cat creator, even if you or I, for example, may not necessarily find the visual quality so appealing, it was a huge viral sensation that received a lot of feedback, and in some senses, that's a social currency. So we need to, I think we need to like decouple the idea that there is no intrinsic value with NFTs, so to speak, because in the end of the day, there is, depending on who you ask and who's actually buying it. And so I have spoken to several of these top collectors who approach the collecting space the same way my traditional contemporary art collectors would, and ask the same types of questions. Now, there's not as much kind of history or data points to provide them to educate their financial decision in a way, and so we're a little bit blind in terms of assessing value at this current stage. But what we're seeing is a true collecting mentality that's being approached to a lot of these purchases. And I would mention that the $79 million price point was too aggressive. We're reaching a speculative moment in time. But apart from that, there's been another $6.6 million price, and then it drops down pretty dramatically. And I think that's kind of where we can start to assess value in a more, realistic way in comparison to some of the art, and treat those a little bit as outliers as we develop our understanding of value within this marketplace. And I think what will be interesting is how people respond, or collectors respond to, their favorite artists, and how do they support them in a financial way. Right now, we're seeing, sorry, you guys just put up a NFT yesterday. I wouldn't necessarily call you guys artists or creators, and you're using it in a very different way than what PAC would be kind of approaching the space as. Both are valuable, and both to different I guess types of people, if you will, and so I think it's interesting to see there's been a flood of artwork in the form of NFTs that have come to market just because of the ease at which it's accessible to create and to kind of identify yourself as a creator in this new marketplace. And I think that will get weeded out in short time, and there will be a better understanding of quality and of value as we continue to progress and kind of uncover some of the the more interesting and thought-provoking artists that come to the space.
Can I make a couple comments?
Yeah, I want you to, please.
Mark, what's so interesting about the question of intrinsic value is that a lot of the NFTs that I see created are engaged with that very question. This is definitely an art movement that is provoking these hard questions about why we value what we value. I mean, I've seen NFTs that say, I got you to pay for this NFT. That's literally what the NFT is. So it reminds me in that sense of the spirit of Dada, and some of the early surrealists calling into question, what is the value of these traditional works that we've always seen venerated and valorized as art. The second thing is your comment about Benjamin Graham. Just a quick side note, for those who are interested in Benjamin Graham, there's a writer who I used to work with called James Scurlock, who now has a Substack newsletter devoted specifically to Benjamin Graham and all the kind of reteaching the lessons that Graham taught investors. It's great. Even if you just get the free part, it's a paid subscription newsletter, but even the free stuff is really, really good. And people who are interested in that question, I encourage them to sign up for Scurlock's newsletter. But I would say that you are correct that is not the sort of stock valuation model is not appropriate here. It is not the right frame in which to look at NFTs. If I could suggest a frame, and it's equally challenging, it's closer to why is cryptocurrency valuable, right? Because it's directly related to cryptocurrency. And one of the things when I started covering this space that I really had to wrap my head around is, what makes Bitcoin go up and down on any given day? It is not the same thing that makes stocks go up and down. Although with GameStop, maybe it kind of is starting to become that. But there aren't things like price to earnings ratio. There aren't fundamentals attached to the value here. You have to look at value creation somewhere else. Now that could be a very slippery area. Don't get me wrong. I'm not endorsing that as a system, but for those who want to understand it, you have to kind of develop a different framework.
Well, Max, I know that you believe that one of the reasons Pak is a particularly interesting artist to represent in this auction is because Pak themselves, and they do refer to themselves in the plural, are a practitioner of blockchain creativity on their own. Maybe you should talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So my relationship with Pak has been a fortuitous one, just because I've really uncovered and developed my own sense of understanding of what the possibilities of crypto, or sorry, of kind of crypto native NFTs are through these conversations. I believe that Pak, I believe that there's three different kind of types of classification we can give to some of the NFTs that we're seeing right now. You have kind of social creators that are kind of capitalizing on their assets and monetizing social norms in a way. So you have like Gronkowski as an athlete, or some of these musicians that are capitalizing on the fact that they have a huge amount of following and they have a lot of people that are interested in what they're trying to do, and they're now commercializing through NFT forms. Then you have what I would classify, somewhat different is like Beeple, for example, who was previously a digital artist, primarily focused in, creating through the use of digital medium, but is now, using the NFTs to kind of tokenize and sell off those creations. But for me, Pak kind of brings a different element to the entire equation, in that they are kind of pushing the boundaries of what the technology of blockchain offers and its implications in a broader sense of the art. So Pak was kind of so there is an intrinsic link between the value of cryptocurrency and these NFTs, as we can all understand and establish. And I think Pak is uniquely positioned to kind of comment on this close interaction, this close relationship through the conceptualization of his work. So I would characterize Pak more so as like a kind of a conceptual digital designer, if you will, that doesn't necessarily have like a real world asset that then just gets digitalized and NFT tokenized for commercial gain.
Okay, Mark, one of the audience members has asked a question that goes to something that I know you have strong opinions about. I'll just read it. It's Eric Luden. He says, what determines value? Who determines value? I mean, to me, he said he has a friend who's a photographer, somebody he knows, Peter Lick, who sells his prints for a lot of money, but he's a great marketer more than a great photographer, in his opinion. But he sold his prints for over $6 million. I didn't know that. Yet he's no Elliot Erwitt or Ansel Adams. I know you believe that a lot of these prices we've seen in the NFT market are closely connected to other factors, visibility, marketability. Can you explain what you think?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a good point to bring up that, the intrinsic value or lack thereof of a painting or photograph is not the only component of the price when it goes up for auction. Jim or Max, I forget, brought up the same thing about, is it the paintbrush or the paint? And that's an important point. That's very true. Earlier, David, you and I talked about the Mona Lisa. How much would the Mona Lisa sell for right now for that little canvas and a little bit of oil paint? It would be tremendous, and it's because of the fame that's associated with that piece of work. And similarly, as Max knows better than I do, the entire art market has that fame or notoriety component in the prices. It's very common. I just want to again bring up the fact that it's in terms of the Mona Lisa example, there's the fame component, and then there's the actual object itself, the unique object. I own the Mona Lisa because, and I can prove it because you can see it in my living room. I own it and you don't. And what's different with at least some of these initial NFTs is that the fame, the notoriety, in my column I write about the social media presence of the creators, that's certainly present, but there's no substance. There's nothing unique being sold except the idea that I bought this thing. So the only uniqueness in the entire transaction is embodied by the NFT itself.
Yeah.
And to to Jim's point, it may look like a Dada-like, art movement-like phenomenon, but I don't see a lot of artists, frankly, who are behind this. I see a lot of technologists who are excited about blockchain. And I think we would make a mistake if we concluded that this was in any way an artistic phenomenon. This is something being driven by technologists and financiers to make money, full stop.
Yeah, one of the points you made in your column, Mark, was that you believe one of the main reasons Beeple was able to command such a high price was that he has 2 million followers on Instagram. So there you have it. And one thing I would just comment, which I wanted to make, I could make a question, but just to make it faster, I'll say the the psycho-emotional aspect of owning, feeling that you are the owner of something has to be a significant part of the reason why someone would spend a lot of money for an NFT, given that they don't actually own anything unique except the right to claim that they own it. And potentially the financial upside of reselling it later, which may be equally important to many of these people if that's what they believe. But I have a question for Max that has come in, not the most complimentary question, I must say, from Chi Perlman, who's a TED person, somebody who I've known for a really long time, somebody who knows a lot about art. Happy to have her here, and I wanted her to ask the question herself, but she wanted me to read it. What does it do to Sotheby's and Christie's when they lend their imprimatur, their crusted credibility as art historians and keepers of provenance, to an artwork like Beeple's? She said Beeple's, not Pak. To me, it looks super opportunistic. As one artist said to me, the art has just left the art market. All that's left is the money. What do you say to that, Max? And if either of the other two of you want to comment on that, I'd be curious also.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, it's a good point. There's always, I have been met with criticism, I would say, from the traditional collecting world, staunch criticism at this early stage, given that there's a lack of understanding or a lack of appreciation that a digital artwork that doesn't have a physical manifestation cannot actually exist as a artwork in and of itself. And I think, you know,
These are your
well,
traditional collectors, some of them saying that to you?
yeah, absolutely. I think some of the traditional collectors, you have, you know, there's always going to be skeptics to something that's quite new and revolutionary and, like, you know, challenging the status quo. Now, my one comment would be that what we're seeing right now is not necessarily an overtake or a disruptive nature of the art market. It's more so attracting a complete new list of creators and a complete new audience. I think that's what's really interesting from the Sotheby's perspective. We're bringing in new, you know, a new audience that would never have interacted with contemporary art before, would never have interacted with Sotheby's previously, and may not even know who Sotheby's is. So their value, they would assume that, you know, what we're buying for millions of dollars that we've ascribed value to, that has been normalized, is absolutely crazy. But they're completely enamored and engaged with this digital medium in ways that, you know, some of the traditional collectors would find crazy. So you have, like, these two kind of polarizing views. What Sotheby's can kind of achieve here is the understanding that both can be and are, to some extent, forms of art, and they don't have to necessarily clash or, you know, take on, you know, polarizing forms. They can all be kind of considered under the one umbrella, and I think Sotheby's has a very unique position to educate and to move forward in that direction.
It's interesting. So you're saying the people who might bid for PAC think that to pay 20 million for a de Kooning is insane.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but yes, I would say that there's a real interest in this type of collector, which is primarily, like, I would say, a younger, you know, 25 to 35-year-old, someone who's, you know, who has made some financial gains in the cryptocurrency market, who has adopted, you know, the blockchain and the fundamental concepts into their, you know, daily lives in an understanding. You know, they don't necessarily need that physical representation to appreciate something. And it's not going to be me or any of my colleagues to say, oh, because this isn't, you know, an artwork, we actually can't, in our definition right now, we can't actually offer that to you. I'm not going to be the one who's going to tell someone that they can't appreciate something because it's a different form than what I'm traditionally selling.
Yeah, I would just to build on that, wanted to respond to something that Mark said a moment ago about, you know, hanging the Mona Lisa in your living room and using that as you know, kind of prima facie evidence of its exclusivity. That NFTs did not invent the questioning of that particular form of ownership, right? I mean, it's been 100 years since Walter Benjamin wrote The Work of Art in the Age of Its Mechanical Reproducibility, where he talks about the aura around the original object as having a, you know, a particular kind of value. But you could Xerox, you know, 100 copies of the Mona Lisa or 1 million copies of the Mona Lisa, and people could still respond to it on some level that's related to that aura, but in some ways it also destroys the aura, because and then, you know, that is a two-edged movement. Some would look at it and say that it's destructive. Some would look at it and say that it's democratic. But I think Max is right to say, you know, it's sort of meaningless for people to object to that trajectory, because the market is going to exist whether, you know, you or I approve of it or not.
Yeah, we have some interesting comments coming. Mark, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little uncomfortable with the argument. Well, you know, maybe you don't like digital art, and that's for the new generation. You know, digital. I don't know a whole lot about the digital art market, but I know that there has been digital art for some time. I've seen it at MoMA. I know downtown there's a gallery called Bitforms that has been selling digital art very successfully for many years. My concerns are not about the existence of digital art. My concern is that, to Chi's previous comment, what we're doing here is we're creating a market that is not about art, because we're actually not selling art. We're not selling anything at all, because the art is already out there freely in the case of these animations. It's only about money. And when we fully financialize any slice of the world, this gets into my radio show now, as we fully financialize and fully digitize various slices of our world, we see similar effects across the board. We see increasing carbon footprint. We see rising levels of inequality. We see the draining of humanity and artistic integrity. There's a great book called The Death of the Artist by Bill Deresiewicz. If you haven't read it, excellent. It talks about the plight of artists like musicians and visual artists and journalists in the age of digital platforms. And if we move the entire creativity market onto the blockchain, I'm afraid that we're going to see some of those same parallel distributions where very few people like people get extremely rich and everyone else gets pushed out to the margins.
Well, Che Perlman just wrote bravo to you, Mark, but so she agrees. But I also, Max, I think you know something about who paid that $69 million for the Beeple and what kind of person that is, or persons or people. Can you just tell us what you do know about it? Because I hadn't heard anything about that until you mentioned something about it when we were speaking earlier.
Absolutely. And honestly, like, you know, as I uncover this, it will kind of undermine some of the arguments that are being made, and that it will focus on like kind of the wealth direction. But I think that the price that was achieved was a real marketing stunt, and that is because it was purchased by a fund, and the fund had ownership of other works and essentially increased the value of their entire portfolio. Now, they are also treating the artwork as a true embodiment of an artwork. They're creating an entire online exhibition in Decentraland. It's very kind of metaphysical, or like kind of moving away from what the traditional art market is in a very huge leap, I would say. But yeah, I think that, you know, again, it was kind of a little bit of a marketing stunt, but, you know, there is an artistic value that they appreciated in that work.
So for those kind of people, it's sort of the art world equivalent of Peter Thiel's sometimes ridiculed on Silicon Valley, for example, idea of creating a new country floating in the Pacific that is entirely governed by libertarian principles. But yeah, so if it's a fund, you got to believe some part of the motivation is that there is a belief there will be a resale market for this that is real. And so that is really a factor, Max, you're saying, right? You agree with that? But
Yeah,
let me just ask, Jim, before you say, I want to make one comment. The fact that Kevin Roose of the New York Times sold his column on NFTs for over $500,000 last week raises the question, and Mark was asking me earlier, will that also potentially be a good investment? But I'm just trying, Jim, anything you want to say, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand completely why people want to focus on a $69 million sale, et cetera. And we've shaped this conversation in a particular way by inviting Max from Sotheby's. But it just feels very urgent to me to point out that that's one tiny sliver of what this technology is going to be used for.
Right.
It came up in another Techonomy conversation a couple of weeks back that Kings of Leon, the band, has put out their new album as an NFT, and I think that represents a way that artistic creators can have a relationship with their fans that completely transcends what you know, the way that music has functioned for decades and decades, and that we should not dismiss that because in some ways the blockchain is susceptible to abuse it creates inequality or increases carbon footprint, all of which are legitimate concerns. But I think we risk losing sight of the creative opportunities that this has presented.
Can I ask a cross question? Jim, can you say more about that? Because I have friends in bands who put up albums on Bandcamp, and they're totally satisfied with their connection with their fans and the cut they get from Bandcamp, especially on Bandcamp Fridays. Tell me, how is Kings of Leon issuing their album on an NFT going to completely revolutionize everything away from what artists already have available on Bandcamp?
Well, I think for one thing, it opens up opportunities for fans to buy and sell the music themselves, right? I mean, that's what the marketplace creates through the technology. I don't think you can do that on Bandcamp. I don't think, maybe they don't want to do that on Bandcamp, and maybe some artists want to do that. Maybe some artists don't want to do that. Maybe some fans want to do that, don't want to do that. But I think we are at very, very early stages of a marriage between technology and creativity that could yield results that are very positive for a lot of artists and creators, and possibly negative for other aspects of society. I think it's way too soon to tell.
Okay, I'm going to take a chance here and try to turn on the mic for Rick Smolin. Rick has had a bunch of really interesting comments in the chat, and Rick is a sort of legendary person, the inventor of the Day in the Life of series of books, a photographer, a curator, a journalist, a longtime techonomist. And you just said so many interesting things, Rick. I'm ambushing you to ask you to say some of them in audio. Okay, good.
Share skepticism, but I also think it's so exciting to see something brand new like this, with people experimenting like crazy. There's such excitement around this. If you go to Clubhouse right now, there are literally 24-hour conversations about NFTs. Everyone's trying to figure out, what is this thing? Is there value there? Is it all hype? I can't help but think that when Andy Warhol painted his Campbell soup cans years ago, that people had the exact same reaction that Mark's having now. And my reaction when I first saw that was like, who would pay for somebody to paint a picture of a soup can? Why is that art? Why is there any value there at all? I just think that there's such tremendous creativity right now. Everyone's trying to figure out, what is an NFT? What kind of art form connects to it? As somebody in the photography space, I'm looking at it thinking, I would love to own, Moonrise by Ansel Adams. I mean, yes, you can buy a print of it for your wall. You can buy a poster. You can buy a postcard. You can look at it online. But I would love to be. I'm the only person in the world that can own, the NFT of that. In a way, this is creating almost like an alternate source of value. You're not selling the copyright. You're not selling the print. It's like the NFT world is creating an entire different sort of currency in digital space. And I'll shut up in a second here, but the last thing is, I noticed that my daughter Phoebe and my son Jesse, who are in their teens and 20s, they don't care about the physicality of prints. As a photographer, I think I want something I can hang on my wall or put on my refrigerator. The kids are perfectly happy to have those memories, those photographs of their lives live in the digital world, and they don't really care about the physical part of it. So I think, to Max's point, there's a whole generation of people right now that don't care about art being physical. It's the world they've grown up in. So now I'll shut up.
Well, that's really a good set of points, Rick, and it goes to the increasing importance of Instagram in the art world, for example, which I know you have some thoughts about, Max. I don't know if you want to comment about that, but
Yeah, I mean, Instagram, I think, was created in 2010 and really allowed artists to approach a very global audience in a very immediate way, and connect with people around the world, share their concepts. But again, it was all through a digital form, and people are buying physical artworks more and more increasingly off of an image alone. So that interaction between the physical and the between you and the physical component of the work is becoming less valued in a way, obviously you have an understanding that it will once it'll arrive to you and you can have that interaction once it gets there. But value associations are not necessarily driven by that alone anymore. And that's what I think what's interesting to see how the art world is developing. And that's a byproduct of the pandemic. The art world has done an incredible job of like growing, or at least maintaining, let's say. And that's because people have become more and more open to buying, physical artworks across digital mediums.
I have a
across
question for
digital
you,
ways.
I have a question for you, which might sound like facetious, but I mean it seriously. Do you think the value of Robert Ryman's work will decline as a result of what you just said?
No. So I actually don't think that. I think that, again, I don't think that one world will, or one market.
He's an artist who does
overtake
alt-white
another.
paintings. That's why.
Yeah, sorry. Robert Ryman is all like purely. It's purely the physical interaction between the viewer and the painting. Otherwise, on a digital rendition, it loses all interest or aspect. And so that will still be key. That will still be prevalent in the art market. But what's happening now, and I think that there'll be some adoption, but again, there'll also be some people that will just never buy into the NFT movement, and that's totally fine. But you're seeing, creators having that same, let's say collectors having that same reaction to something that's digital, and they don't need that physical component. Actually, the physical component would actually reduce the whole messaging or the whole component of and the whole process that one has with this artwork. I actually think that those who create an NFT, of a physical work are kind of, yes, there's a place for it, absolutely, but it's more in like using the technology to enhance the provenance and the authenticity of the work more so than just creating another artwork that someone can interpret differently because it's in a different form.
Max, let me ask you as we begin to wrap up here, where do you see this going? I mean, I said earlier, I think we're in very, very early stages of this as technology, as culture, all these things. I'm curious, if you see the technology getting more sophisticated and perhaps easier to use, if you see a new kind of audience out there for these types of creations and transactions, and finally, beyond the art world, if there are applications that you think we're close to using blockchain technology, what are they?
Yeah. So I think the next 6 months will be a very pivotal time for for the development of this marketplace. What Mark concerns are my concerns as well. And if you just apply the value exclusively to these NFTs, that will not build the foundation. That will just create this flipper mentality, this flipper culture, and you will be left with the last one holding the bag. So I think quality obviously needs to be achieved and be demonstrated in meaningful ways. I think that's where someone like Sotheby's can come in, and other marketplaces and other critics and kind of creators can really kind of push everyone into a global kind of acceptance of this world. And I also think a real crucial point of the development will be the display of this work, because that kind of undermines the entire process in a way. For me, I still want to be able to enjoy and like have some sort of interaction with this artwork, living with it. So I think the display component will be kind of a very critical one as we start to adopt into the traditional art world, more exclusively.
It reminds me, Bill Gates, when he built his house back in the day, got all excited about digital renditions of artwork being on his wall, and kind of made the prediction, I think in his very first book, that the original work might become less important. So there are precedents for some of this. But I want to go, Rick Smolin, our good friend, made another excellent point in the chat that I want to just highlight. And then I want to hear if Mark has any closing thoughts in particular, and Jim too. He said that in many of these deals, I believe most of them, and Max, you can comment, the original artist, because it's a smart contract and built in, has to always get 10% of the sale price anytime
It can
that
vary.
artwork changes hands ever for perpetuity, and that is irrevocable. And he's saying that's fantastic because the ability to reward and protect the artist into the future is so powerful. So thank you, Rick, for making that point. Max, will that be true in the pack sale also?
That will be, yes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the first time we're exploring this, which is great for the creator. I mean, if you can promote yourself as a creator and, you know, have some success, there's real opportunity here because of that. And that is fundamentally different from how the art market is set up currently.
Yeah. Mark, any thoughts that we haven't gotten to?
Yeah, I appreciate what Max is saying. Obviously, Max, you are attempting to focus on the artistic relevance of this new movement. My concern is that the people driving this and who are benefiting are generally not the artists. And so outside of your sphere, more generally, it seems like more of a move towards financialization than anything else. And that to me is not going to lead to a great flourishing of human creativity. David, if I could finish, I'd like to read a limerick. This was a limerick.
That's a good way. We started with an SNL skit, so ending with a limerick is good.
Here's my final comment, and this is from a Twitter account called Limericking. The NFT market has grown, as 8-figure auctions have shown. The overall price is a worse climate crisis for art you pretend that you own. Thanks, everybody.
I like
That's
it.
a good one. I wanted to just note that one of the commenters has said that it is correct that all NFT art sales include a royalty for the artist, but I know many of them do.
You usually have to turn it off if you don't want that setting. It's the default setting is that the artist will get some cut, and it doesn't have to be 10%. You can vary it.
Jim, any closing comments from you?
No, I want to thank everybody for attending. We had a lot of fantastic questions from the audience, and thank Mark and Max for lending their expertise to our ears.
And I had a bunch of really interesting people in the audience. I wish we could have heard from more of them, but thank you, Max. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jim. We're going to continue to be talking about this at Techonomy, certainly in connection to selling our own NFT of our notorious intellectual property. Which of course we will retain the rights to, even if somebody else owns the NFT of Zuckerberg saying it's a crazy idea, which is pretty funny. But the limerick says it all. Thank you all. Talk to you. Have a great weekend.